I had so much fun making my last spell effect video, I had to jump right into another one with this cool ice wall spell effect. And the techniques used in this video can be used to make all kinds of awesome ice-based terrain. Hey there, and welcome back to Tabletop Witchcraft. This week, we're going to get our gloves dirty working with a couple different types of resin. A UV resin, and this resin right here. It's Super Clear 2.0 liquid glass 2 to 4 inch thick pour resin. It's by Fiberglass Coatings Inc. They were nice enough to send this to me for a couple future builds, but I couldn't wait. I had to get my hands dirty working with this stuff. And I thought, what better time than to pour a 3-inch thick block of resin for this ice wall spell effect. Now, I had a little mix up with my mold, had a little crack in it, and I had to pour all the resin back into my mixing cup. It was kind of a mess, but even after all that mix up and having to restir it, there isn't one bubble in this entire block. It's absolutely amazing. I'm shocked, I'm amazed, I love this stuff. Now there's also one other area in the video where I'm still not quite sure what went wrong. Let me know in the comments below what I did or what I need to change. I'd really appreciate it. Alright, if you're ready, let's go grab those supplies and let's get crafting. Alright, we're going to use some really cool products in this video, starting with this liquid glass. This stuff is really cool. You can pour up to 2 to 4 inch thickness with that. To make our mold, we're going to use some acrylic sheets. We're going to use that tool right there to cut the sheet. We're going to attempt to use some of this Well-Don right here, as well as this mold release, which comes in real handy when pulling that mold apart. Now, as long as you use this tool correctly, it's going to work really awesome to help snap the acrylic sheets very easily. And just be careful, that tool is actually really sharp. Alright, so the ice wall block is going to be 1 inch wide by 6 inches long and 3 inches high. So you're going to want to cut your acrylic sheets just a little bit larger than that. That way you can get those dimensions of the final resin block when you're done. Now on the interior of this, what you're going to do is wipe on some of this mold release, and you're going to let it just sit on there for maybe 5-10 minutes and then buff it out to a high shine like that. Alright, now I decided to grab some of this Well-Don and use that to hold the mold together. And I don't know what happened here. I'm pretty sure I bought all the right stuff. I got an acrylic sheet, but it didn't hold for anything. I tried for like half an hour to get this stuff to work, and it didn't work. So I wasn't going to keep, obviously, the acrylic sheet on this as a final product, so I decided to go with some super glue to hold this in place, and I know it works really well from my 40K build I did. I'll put a link up above to that video. And the super glue held really well, and for the most part kept the leaks from coming through. Now for the liquid glass, you're going to want to mix this stuff up for 5 minutes in one container, and then spread it into another cup, and then mix it for another 3 minutes. You want to really make sure to mix this stuff well. And I was nervous because this stuff is extremely viscous, and you know, I thought that it was going to contain a whole bunch of air bubbles and it might be a little bit of a problem. But no matter what I did, and I even tried to like get some air into this thing to see like what would happen with these bubbles, it was so liquidy that the air bubbles came right to the top, and I had absolutely no bubbles in this block when I was done with this craft. So this stuff is actually a really amazing product. You can see it looks like just like water right now. Now, using this resin dye, typically when you're putting ink into resin or something like that, you got to make sure you're using the right stuff, otherwise you could have a bad reaction. You don't need a lot. I actually put a lot of dye into this to get the color that I wanted. I probably could have went with a little bit less because it did come out a little dark, but as you can see, I used a lot right here, and I actually added a lot more off camera to get to this color right here. Alright, now I mixed it for 5 minutes, put it to a second cup, mixed it for 3 minutes, and now we're dumping it into our mold. And you can see really how the bubbles just go right to the surface on this. They're almost all gone. that quickly in a 3-inch thick pour. Absolutely awesome. Okay, then I decided to just, freehand what I wanted some icicles to look like on the outside of that block. As you can see, I've removed the acrylic sheet on it. So it's just actually really satisfying having that block right there as is. But I want some really nice white icy shards on the outside of this. So I drew it to scale on a piece of paper, and all I'm doing is transferring it over onto the block now with a Sharpie. And you can kind of sketch it on there. Don't worry about having it not look perfect, because as you can see right here, we're really gonna hammer on this thing with this saw. And the nice part about this, and honestly it was a really unexpected outcome, was the way the saw cut through this resin. It made a really cool icy looking effect to the resin. And I actually didn't have to add anything. I was going to add some white water highlight by Woodland Scenics, and I decided not even to bother with that because it added a really cool effect just by cutting the resin all by itself. Now if you want to clear that up, you can always mix a little bit more of this 2-part resin together and paint over it, and then just let that cure as well, and it will get rid of that white looking effect if you don't want that. Now to get rid of any extra burrs on here that you don't want, I just shaved them right off with an X-Acto knife. Alright, now for our icicles, I wanted to go with a method that I did back in my Ice Cave book nook. I'll put a link up above to that. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some clear toy packaging, and we're going to basically trace out the cool design that we made, and we're going to wrap this in some cotton and use some UV resin to get some really cool ice effects. So you want to stretch out a cotton ball real thin and set this aside, rip it into some smaller pieces, and as you add the UV resin, which I've already put a bunch on the clear plastic, you're going to just add some of these cotton balls, and they're going to almost, not dissolve. They're not going to dissolve, but they're going to get soaked up into that UV resin. They're going to hold it, and almost instantly it's going to start looking like a block of ice. So you're going to want to work in maybe about a 1-inch section at a time, and then place that underneath a UV light to let it cure. Now we want to place the resin block about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch above the bottom of the white ice sheets that we made, because below that is where we're going to add all of our LEDs to make this ice wall illuminate. Now once we have all of our ice sheets on here, if you have any sections that don't fit together, like that little piece right there, no big deal. Cut a little strip of that plastic out, place it on there with some cotton over the top. It's going to blend in real nice. And as you can see, you don't need glue either, because we can just use the UV resin to make it cure right in place. Alright, now a really important part of this craft is taking just a little bit of that UV resin and a cheap paintbrush and literally painting the entire thing, because you're going to miss a lot of little pieces of cotton, and it's going to look like wispy cotton pieces on there. It's not going to look good. Putting a nice thin coat of that UV resin over the whole thing soaks up all that little stuff and really brings this whole piece together. Alright, now on to some electrical. You've seen me use these LED strips in my fireball diorama. I'll put a link up above to that. And if you look closely at these, there's going to be a little scissor mark, and that's where you can safely cut these and reuse them. Now that I've cut this and I got the battery pack on that piece to the right, don't get rid of that piece on the left. You can always reuse that and wire it up later on. Now grabbing some flickering blue LEDs, we're going to take the positive and the negative portion, and we're going to run them in series to have 3 of these glowing on one section of a Conway board. Now I will also put a link up above to my simple LED wiring video, where I'll show you how to wire up all this stuff. Check that video out. Once you're done watching this one, it'll make a lot more sense how to wire this stuff up, and it's very easy to do so. All you want to do is make sure you're going from the positive to the negative, and so on down the row. You can do up to 3 LEDs on one of these, I guess, channels on the Conway board. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to do 2 3 light sections. So we're going to have 6 flickering blue LEDs in this base, along with some white LEDs from that strip as well. And I'm just putting a bend in that there to make sure it doesn't pull apart as I'm working on it later on. And some of that wire right there is just to elongate that chain. So here it is, all 3 put together. I've got the positive on the left, and I put a little bit of black marker on the piece on the right for the negative. Alright, here's a little diagram up above that you can use to help wire this up. You can pause the video right there. And all I'm doing is adding a 3rd negative piece right here. So we've got one going to the LED strip, and we have another that's going to go to our Conway board. And then just a little heat shrink tubing to keep everything nice and neat and make sure we don't have any issues once we pack everything into the base of this build. And you're probably going to get a kick out of it at the end of this video. I really do have a ton of electronics packed into the bottom of this wall. Alright, and just to give you a little close-up of that Conway board, this is what it looks like right here. Again, that LED video, wiring video, is going to give you a really good overview on how to wire this thing up. Alright, so, I said the LED wiring video, check that out. I had to show you this part. This freaked me out right here. I'm sitting here at night, I'm working on this build, and look who decided to come by and say hi. Yeah, not a fan. Okay, now we're going to work on a simple plate for the base. Going to use a little bit of chipboard. I just want to mark out that area, cut it a little bit smaller than the size we actually need it, and using some hot glue and a couple of 3mm by 6mm magnets, we'll use those to hold the base right in place. And once you have the magnet on the side, you want to put a good amount of hot glue over it just to really lock it in place so it doesn't pull out. And you're really not going to take this in and out of the craft once you have it done, because you'll see here in just a second, we're going to add a really cool switch to the bottom. So once you have it in place, you're really never going to have to take it apart unless you have to, obviously replace the battery. Alright, and here's that little switch I was talking about. And you're just going to cut a little tiny slot in the bottom to access the switch from the outside, hot glue it in place, and then we can start cramming all of this stuff onto this base plate. And there it is. I know it looks like a mess, but there's actually plenty of room in the bottom of this to put it all in place. And you're going to be all set and ready to go for your next game session with a really cool ice wall spell effect. Alright, so this craft makes a really neat looking ice wall spell effect. But keep in mind, you can use these techniques to make a lot of really neat looking ice terrain as well. Now, as far as the resin goes, this stuff really is a winner. Super impressed with the lack of bubbles in the final result, meaning there wasn't a single one in this entire block. So super impressed with that. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you'd like to see for the next spell effect video. Please consider following me over on Patreon. It's support over there that really helps fund the channel. And I'm constantly adding all kinds of cool little perks to the tiers. The Coven is a very popular one. I keep adding lots of perks to that. And recently we just started playing RPGs over Discord on Saturday mornings as well. So it's a lot of fun to get to know my patrons that way. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll see you around.